With most lifestyle diseases, an accompanying factor is obesity, or excess weight and fat. So while we often just think of losing weight in terms of aesthetic value, there's actually a much bigger picture here. While looking great in your favorite pair of jeans or when you go to the beach certainly is a motivating factor to lose weight, an even greater motivation should be that our overall well-being is dependent on it. When we learn to maintain good health, the weight will begin to just come off. And so, in turn, that means that if we're carrying around this extra weight, it is an indicator or symptom of underlying problems. So far in this series, we've discussed autoimmune diseases, Alzheimer's, dementia, heart disease, and other signs of aging. Now, we will learn about weight loss. We should keep in mind how all of these factors are tied together. When we address our body as a whole and facilitate overall healing, all of these other factors will begin to remedy themselves. I'm so glad you're here joining us in this series. We've got an exciting gift in store for you, and I'm just thrilled that you're here. I want to let you know that we have a special offer that's being offered during this free screening, and that is to own the Bible Health Success Protocol. You can actually get all 12 modules, you can get the written transcripts, the MP3s, and keep this resource for life. When you make the decision to do that, not only are you having a valuable resource that you can keep in your home to help your loved ones, to protect your health, to protect your loved ones, and it's there for you whenever you need it and at that very moment. Not only do you have that gift, but you're also supporting our mission. We have a God-given mission to help the world and to give healing, and all these things that we create, all the costs are actually covered by people like yourself that choose to support this mission. So I just want to invite you that if you feel moved, if you'd like to own this resource and you want to support us and also secure a great saving, because we do have great savings and bonuses that we offer at this very time. So please go ahead and take action on that if you feel called, if you feel that that's something you want to do. You can do that by clicking the link below.
When you gain weight over time, as I did, when you put on those extra 2 pounds every year, or however, whatever that statistic is, you don't really realize how fat you've gotten. The thing that really instigated the trigger was just cutting the processed carbs out of what I was eating. I came across ketogenics, or a ketogenic way of eating, really through trial and error, by cutting out the carbs, first and foremost, cutting out the French fries, cutting out the bread, the bun, the rice, and these types of things. I started feeling better, and it became a bit of a virtuous cycle. So I thought, well, this seems to be working. What can I do? What can I learn more about this? And how can I, further this progress? And through research and trial and error, I essentially ended up at a ketogenic diet. Yeah, it's been a fascinating and rewarding journey. I was sort of resigned to my fate in middle age, that it's just normal that you get rounder and you get fatter and you get more lethargic. That's what happens at that age. We've got our lives, we've got our stresses, our stressors, and I thought I was eating healthy, but I was unsuccessful in losing any weight, and that's just the way it was. And then I stumbled across the concept of limiting my carbs, and that was really the tipping point. At my peak, I was 210 pounds, and I really didn't realize how overweight I was. That was my normal, until after I'd lost all that weight. I'd gotten down to about 170 in a period of 3.5 months. And it was only in hindsight that I realized, holy mackerel, how much weight I had gained over the years. And it started with limiting processed carbohydrates. So I cut out the breads, I cut out the French fries, I cut out the potatoes, I cut out the rice, I cut out the sugars, and the high glycemic fruits. And what I began to notice pretty quickly was I was feeling better. I had mental clarity and focus, and better energy levels. All of a sudden, I was not going through the 3 p.m. crash that I needed to counter with coffee and sugar or anything else. I could maintain steady concentration and focus throughout the day. And through a process of trial and error and educating myself, I ultimately ended up on a ketogenic path. And there was a period, and mind you, there was no exercise involved. I just changed what I was putting in my mouth. And there was a period where I was even losing up to 1 pound a day, which was remarkable. I was shedding all of this weight. I was feeling fantastic. And all I did was change what I ate. In fact, I was eating more quantity of food than previously. I was eating more often. But what I found remarkable was the fact that I could eat pretty much any portion at any time, or skip a meal, or not eat a meal, or double up, and it didn't impact my weight. And I leveled out at about 170 pounds and felt great. Now, part of this also...
How much weight did you lose?
I lost about 40 pounds in a period of about 3.5 months. It was at the tail end of that I started exercising, because I had this newfound confidence. I had this body shape and a waist size. I went from a 37-inch waist to 32, which was what I was in college. That I thought to myself, you know, let's work on this and get back to your optimal, you know, physique. And I started doing that, and I saw tremendous results. But I think, you know, the common myth that we've been fed as Americans over the years is the way to fitness, health and fitness, is through, you know, a low-fat, whole wheat diet, which we've seen through contemporary research has been disproven. It's made us the fattest we've ever been. So I was making food choices based on this mantra and only gaining weight over the years. The minute that, you know, I challenged the conventional wisdom and started going down this ketogenic path, weight loss became effortless. And diet is such a loaded word. People look at diet, it's tied to concepts of denial and restrictions. And the only way to lose weight is reduce your caloric intake and then do loads and loads of cardio. But that relies on willpower. And there's only so long you can maintain that before you yo-yo back. I wouldn't call what I do a diet. I would call it just eating real food. And eating the types of foods and eating in the way that we were designed to eat over millions of years of evolution. We only had agriculture for the last 10,000 years, which is a blink of an eye in the term, in evolutionary terms. And so the way that I eat, it doesn't feel like a quote-unquote diet, a restriction, a denial. And it's also why I've been able to maintain it for as long as I have. I've been eating this way now for the last 5 to 6 years. And I feel great. And I've been the healthiest I've ever been. I just call it eating real food. And by cutting out all of the processed garbage that's out there, this just became a virtuous, self-perpetuating cycle for myself that just made me feel better and better. And you know, I feel that difference in health. And I look back at myself when I was resigned to my fate of just being an overweight middle-aged man. And now I know that you know, that is nothing that you need to settle for. And it didn't require any Herculean effort, just some simple food choices.
You glad you made that choice?
Oh, absolutely. Diet should not be about denial or restriction or sacrifice. Anytime you find yourself doing that, you're really setting yourself up for failure. Specifically, start choosing real foods. When you go through the grocery store, avoid the things that come out of a bag or a box or a can. Get stuff that is as close to its original source as possible. Because when you do that, there are a host and a wealth of delicious food options, and you can eat as much of that as you like. I've never heard of anybody getting overweight for eating too many vegetables. And then also, don't forget about the fat. Fat is not bad for you. It's delicious. It's what makes so many of these foods so good. So if you're feeling discouraged, check what it is that you're eating, and if it's been processed, if it's been packaged, if it has sugars or starches, that's probably what's setting you back. And I think the other common myth is you need to exercise vigorously to lose weight. Exercise is the smallest component. Don't get me wrong, exercise is good for you, but it's more the icing on the cake, so to speak. It's what you eat that's going to result in the most dramatic weight loss. The exercise just helps on top. So if you want to do this, it's key, take action, take that first step. I think there's a common misperception that you've got to do everything in huge steps dramatically all at once. Do it incrementally. Start cutting out those things that you shouldn't be eating. You don't have to go cold turkey right away, but you'll notice that the more you start to go along the path of eating real food, the quicker you'll start to see those benefits. And then it becomes a virtuous cycle that gives you more encouragement. But one step at a time, and you'll get there. So this lifestyle and this way of eating really had a dramatic effect around people in my immediate environment, my professional environment, my personal environment. My wife looked at me in a completely different way, and it improved our relationship. There was a point where she confessed to me. She said, "Christopher, I've always loved you, and I love you dearly, but you reached a point where you just were not particularly physically attractive, and now you are, and it's quite satisfying and quite fulfilling to hear that validation and that confirmation coming from my wife, who has no problem in telling me that I'm hot, and that's all that matters. As long as she thinks so, I'm happy."
That brought up emotion for you, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it did?
Oh yeah.
I can feel that.
Yeah.
That's really special to you, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, there's that deep bond and that love that comes over many years of a marriage. But to know that you also still, after being together for 20 years, turn your partner on is a nice feeling.
How much weight did you lose?
I lost, after I met him, I would say I lost about 30 pounds without trying. And I'm never hungry, I'm an eater. My husband and I, we eat, and I can have the flu and keep eating. So there's never any feeling of, you know, I'm deprived, I'm hungry. I just am so very careful about what I put in my body.
And how long did it take you to lose the amount of weight?
You know, he told me don't worry about the scale, so it wasn't like an obsession to weigh all the time, but I would say it took about maybe 2 or 3 months, 3 months maybe, let's say, for the weight to come off. And I don't think about it a lot now. I'd like to be a little stronger, but as far as the weight, you know, whatever.
Do you feel better?
Oh, I certainly do, yes.
Yeah, tell me, so how do you feel as a result of your weight loss?
Well, I think when you're carrying too much weight, and I'd still like to lose about 10 pounds, but it's easy to feel sluggish. It's kind of like having a little backpack or something with you that you don't really want. You're carrying, you know, an extra load, so it gives you more energy. Hopefully you look a little better, and yeah, it's good.
Do you think you look younger?
I hope so. I know.
Tell me, like, be confident. Like, do you think that you look? How do you think you look in comparison?
I think I look. People tell me I look younger. I think I look younger, and I look back on. I see pictures of myself when I felt so sick, and I really looked sick. I looked terrible. And people were calling me all the time, checking on me, you know, because they knew I didn't feel good. That was how my life was defined. And I'm so glad that that is in the past. I sing every week in my church, so we have cameras in our face a lot. And I do think, when I see pictures of myself, I think that I do have some kind of glow that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
And no woman minds that at all.
What does that do to your confidence?
It's great. Feels great.
You sure do have a glow. Come on now.
Thank you.
Yeah, you do. And why don't you tell me that? What is it? Just tell me what the confidence feels like.
It's a great feeling. I've got the combination of I've lived long enough that I've learned a few things, and it's okay to be this age. It's all right. I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah. You haven't got any like Botox and things like that?
No.
Yeah?
No.
You just did the natural
That's a
way.
poison. How could you put that in your body? No.
Yeah, you've chosen a diet, lifestyle to look and feel young, because you could be filled with wrinkles and have a saggy face and all this kind of thing, but you look like a Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, right. That's funny.
Yeah.
I would just say to anybody who is watching that is struggling and has pain in their life, things that they know they want to change, I would just encourage you that it can happen for you. It happened for me. You can feel so much better, and you don't have to be sick.
I had always been super skinny all growing up, like never had an issue with weight. And then I guess it was probably after college, every year I just gained and gained and gained and gained. And at first I wasn't eating well, and then I started learning more and more, and I did some really ridiculous shake diet thing, and it worked. I lost a bunch of weight, but then I gained it all back, and I was even eating healthier from what everyone else and Whole Foods and all the other people around you say you're eating healthy and eating foods that are marketed as healthy, and it wasn't making a difference for me. And then I went to see the holistic doctor, and everything changed. And all I did was take a few certain things out of my diet, and that was it. Seriously, that was it. And I guess over the course of 2 or 3 months, I lost probably 25 to 30 pounds up front, and then I got retested for some more things, and I kind of plateaued off for a little while. And then when some of my test results came back, we readjusted and changed a few things, and that made a huge difference, and I lost another 10 or 15 pounds. So I'm due for another test in a month or so. So I'm really curious to see what that shows and if we need to change even more things. So I don't know, it's a journey, but it's worth it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And how do you feel having lost that weight? How does that make you?
Oh, I feel awesome. Like, I mean, nobody wants to weigh more than they're supposed to. Like, it just doesn't feel good.
Does that affect your confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always been a fairly confident person, but I would avoid looking at myself in the mirror so I wouldn't have to think about it. And now I don't like, now when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm not like, oh, don't look at myself. You know? You
actually, can you look in the mirror and feel sexy?
Yeah. Well, and my husband too, he's always been great, always says, you're so beautiful. And before, I would cry when he would tell me that, partly because it felt good, but partly because it hurt, like, because I didn't feel beautiful in a way. Not like he was hurting my feelings, but just that I just didn't feel beautiful. I knew that he saw me as beautiful, but I didn't feel. And now he says, you're so beautiful, and I'll say, thank you, because I feel like it's true. I believe it. And I know that my outward appearance isn't what makes me beautiful, but I also know that it's the first thing people see. And so I hope that when they see me and then they meet me, it matches, you know? I don't know.
Did your relationship with God and the principles of the Bible, did they help you in your journey with weight loss?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's a specific thing or verse that I could point you to and say this did it for me, but I think having a relationship with God and coming to Him with the desires of my heart, my desire to be healthy, my desire to love my body and me the way that God made me, and trusting Him with those feelings and coming to Him and saying, I know you made me to be me, but I just don't feel pretty, and just coming to Him with those insecurities and stuff. I know that He hears those cries and that He's with us on the whole journey. I know that, I think inviting Him to come along is so important, because treating our bodies the way that He wants us to treat them isn't something that is easy or that we can do on our own. That asking for the Holy Spirit to come in, to give us self-control, to give us patience, to give us perseverance, all of those things, asking the Holy Spirit to come in is so important, because our human nature isn't strong enough to just quit. It's a lifelong journey of habits and cultural norms that you have to break through, and it's not easy. And that's why I think having a community of people around you to support you, and leaning on each other, and ultimately leaning on God is like the key. I don't know. So God wants to be with you on this journey. He wants to walk with you every step of the way, and He's not going to let you down. If you've been walking along this journey alone and trying to do it all by yourself, invite God in. Ask for His strength, rely on Him, because He does have the strength that you need, and He will be with you, and He will walk with you on this journey. Take Him up on His offer today.
I want to tell you the truth about weight loss, about unwanted weight gain, where it really comes from, and where it may come from for you, assessing a variety of scenarios, so you can really make sure you've considered everything. And I promise you, what you're going to discover is you're going to see some areas that you have not even considered could be causing weight gain for you. And that should be really exciting. I'll tell you why that's exciting, because as soon as you work it out, you've got the key to take it away, to reverse it. And that's why I've got this guy here right now. And so I'm relying on the clinical experience of doctors that have absolutely dedicated their lives, and in many cases, to specific areas, right? So we're gleaning from all this gift and talent. So I want you to really take advantage of that, see the value in it. We're going to talk to Dr. Davidson. You've worked very in a lot of detail in looking at some of the areas like we just talked about your wife with Lyme disease, and I believe that actually was a key for you, that opened your mind to a lot of different areas of where illness and problems come from, because you understood that with Lyme you can't just, what a lot of doctors do, just try to kill that. We just got to kill that, but then they don't realize that is not. It's not the core of the problem, and there's a symbiosis of problems, there's an ecosystem of problems, and I believe the same is for weight loss, and that's why I've done this. Is it true? What are some of the causes for unwanted weight gain that you've discovered clinically?
Well, it really comes down, I love what you said, where it's not just to kill the bug. Same thing with weight loss. It's not just I want to lose weight. There's an underlying reason why our bodies are stuck into this state, where our bodies aren't in an ideal state. So if you look at the body as a whole, and somebody has weight gain, there's a lot of underlying issues typically to that. It can be chronic infection, it can be a toxicity issue. You know, our fat is a reservoir to put toxins into it, to protect ourselves from the toxins. So let's say that we go golfing and we're walking on a fairway that just got sprayed with pesticides, and our body's getting exposed to that. Our body's saying, okay, we got to process this. We got to clear these toxins out, right? Let's say it's something in the sky, or we're eating food that has chemicals on it, or we walk into a moldy building. All these different exposures to chemicals. Our body wants to try to get rid of those chemicals. If it can't get rid of all of them, it's got to store them somewhere. Because if the chemicals are just floating around the body, they're wreaking havoc on our body. They're affecting our organs. They're causing inflammation. And they're causing dysfunction. And the number one place where toxins will get put, guess where it is?
Well, yeah, I got it.
Fat.
Really?
into our fat cells. So if somebody is weight loss resistant, meaning they can't lose weight, oftentimes what I see on the clinical side is that they're toxic. They have chemical bombardment in their body, and their body is saying, wait a minute, why would I get rid of these fat cells when I'm protecting you from all these chemicals that you were exposed to? So I'm holding on to them. So one of the first things that I see in the weight loss world is this need to try to, first of all, look at your environment and say, okay, what am I being exposed to that is toxicity? And we can't live in a bubble. But in that, what can I do to minimize my exposure? So if I'm using Tupperware and I'm microwaving that in the microwave and heating the Tupperware up and the plastic's going into my food, well, how about I just switch to like a glass Pyrex and then switch to a convection oven where I'm warming it up and not microwaving it? What if somebody's using Teflon pans? Let's switch to maybe a ceramic pan or a stainless steel pan. It's like these different steps. Or you're drinking tap water. Let's drink filtered water, right? If we can minimize the onslaught of chemicals coming into our body, now we can then start focusing on, okay, how do we detoxify? How do we clear the chemicals out? It makes no sense in my mind if we don't do step one of trying to remove what's going into us, if we're gonna just jump and say, I'm just gonna detox. I'm gonna clear all the chemicals out, because you still have this onslaught, and the body's only gonna deal with, Jonathan, is only gonna deal priority with what you're exposed to. So if you can minimize exposure, now the body can start working at deep pockets of exposure. Once you start detoxifying chemicals, now the body's like, why do we have these fat cells here? We don't have any chemicals to hold on to, so guess what the fat will do?
It'll go away.
It'll go away. The body will go back to where it needs to be. And I like to look at, I really believe the body, like you'd mentioned, is a self-healing, self-regulating, right? Like God doesn't make junk. Everything's made in perfection. We just have to figure out what's interfering with that. And if chemicals are the reason somebody has weight gain, well then let's stop the exposure and then let's start working on actually truly detoxifying the cells at the cellular level so that our body can start being healthy again.
Excellent. So, I mean, I see a lot of really great takeaways there, and I want to get you to really kind of start listing these out. So if you're looking at triggers, you're really at the right place. And if I'm not mistaken, it may be the very first place to start. Assessing triggers. Assessing triggers that are...
Oh, triggers, yep.
Yeah, yep.
It's the Australian accent.
So we're assessing triggers, right? And I, like from my experience and even my consultations with you, it's been our first step really to... Right. And so assessing the triggers. Now, let's list those out, Dr. J. So for the person watching, like, depending on what their problems are, they may have a whole list of different triggers. For example, specific medications, right? I'm not saying that somebody should just toss all their medications immediately in the trash. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that they do come with known side effects, right? Yep. And so then that just is another thing to assess, and so you might want to include that. And we looked at filtered water and Teflon in bottled water if we're drinking bottled water excessively with the BPA and so forth. But could you list out a few just to identify so somebody can immediately start taking the action on that?
Yeah, I like to look at environment as a category. So like your house, it really comes down to air and water quality. So if you have water damage, and that's really the big thing with the past hurricane season and things, is it's not the hurricane itself, it's the water damage it leaves behind and then makes buildings mold. So if you have mold in your house, that's a big source. If you have mold in your workplace, mold in your car, where somebody runs the air conditioner and then they just shut the car off, that's one of the easiest ways to start getting mold in your car. So the key is like when you're running your car, you have the air conditioner on, shut it off at least a minute, if not 2-3 minutes before you actually turn the car off. Blast the vents on high to blow all that moisture out. So we could have house, we could have car, we could have workplace. Schools are notorious for having, mold, and mold is in the biotoxin category. Biotoxin basically means living toxin. Lyme disease is in this category as well. And it's well known that biotoxins and infections like Lyme disease can actually affect our leptin levels in our body, or what they call leptin resistance. Leptin is the hormone that says to your body, hey, burn fat. Like my body will produce leptin, and then once my body hears that hormone, then it'll start burning fat. The issue when we're overweight is not that we don't have enough leptin, it's that we can't hear the leptin. It's like if we're driving in the car and let's say you're the taxi driver and I'm sitting in the back seat and I'm like, Jonathan, turn left up here, and you don't hear me. You have earmuffs in. I'm telling you what to do, but you're just driving straight because you don't hear it. Same thing happens in our body, that we have leptin hormone, but we can't hear it. And that's what we call leptin resistance. And what causes that? Biotoxins, chronic infections. So environment is a big key. Chronic infections is also a big key. So Lyme disease, other bacteria like Ehrlichia, Bartonella, mycoplasma, viruses like Epstein-Barr, HHV, human herpes virus. All these different infections can actually affect leptin resistance as well. And then toxicity in general causes cellular inflammation, and then that is what affects the receptors for leptin to hear. So triggers, I would say mold, Lyme disease, heavy metal toxicity, pesticide exposure, especially glyphosate. That's a really big issue right now in our society. Emotional triggers. Now this is an interesting one. This is deep. So let's say that, just thinking of a past case, let's say there was a young girl that got molested by maybe somebody at school or a family member, just theoretically, and then said, you know what, if I'm not attractive, I won't get bothered, so I'm going to put weight on. So from an emotional standpoint, this unconscious thing that if I'm not a pretty person, I'm not going to get abused or molested anymore, and so they do that to themselves, and later on it's like this unconscious program that keeps running. And that's just an example, but emotional traumas, that's a really big category. Emotional stressors, that have happened in the past. And then there's physical traumas too. We know if you're involved in a car accident and your head does what they call a whiplash, and even at 5-10 mile an hour car accident, right? Like, oh my gosh, it was just a little fender bender. Your head whips 2 to 3 times faster than your muscles and ligaments can hold on to. And that can actually affect what they call the cervical curve. So the curve in our neck, we're supposed to have like this banana curve. And anytime we lose that curve, it puts pressure on the discs and the nerves. Well, one of the organs that's right in the middle that the nerves go to, right in the middle of the neck where that curve can be affected, is the thyroid. Well, you talk about an organ that affects metabolism and weight gain, thyroid's going to be mentioned all over the place. So there's a lot of different triggers, and I think from a clinician standpoint, we can talk about what are the most common ones, like I'm mentioning right now, but it's always diving into each individual case and figuring out for that person, what are they? How do we identify them? And we identify them through history, examination, testing, whether it's lab testing or doing like energetic type testing. And I think, I believe, Jonathan, there's not a one right answer. I think they're all tools, and we look at them all together to then decide what's really the source or sources to the health issues. Because then in the end, to simplify this, it's figuring out for that individual, what are the upstream sources, it's usually plural, sources that are causing health issues. And then we identify those. Now we can make a roadmap as to, okay, what needs to be dealt with in order to get to those upstream sources. So let's say I have detoxification, I'm toxic. I have heavy metal exposure, like my wife is a great example. She had multiple amalgam silver fillings in her mouth. They're called silver, but they're 50% weight mercury. So we had those out by a biological dentist. And we know research-wise that the more amalgams you have and the longer, the more mercury in the brain. So we can detox mercury out of the tissues within a few months. To clear it out of the brain, we're looking maybe 2, sometimes even 4 years. So it can be a long-term thing because the body just won't release all the toxins at once because it's too dangerous. So it's slow and low process. But if we said, okay, my wife, she needs to detox heavy metals, and we just immediately jump to that, now if her body's not ready for it, if the drainage pathways aren't open, if her gut's not ready to handle it, if we dive into detoxification, our body's not ready, that's when you can start having reactions and run into issues. My firm belief is that there's not one perfect diet for everybody. I believe we all have different blueprints. I also believe in this idea of adaptation, that we shouldn't eat the same food year-round all the time, because, like, for instance, in the summertime, when we're exposed to a lot of sunshine, the mitochondria, which are like they're the energy cell factories for our body, like they're the ATP powerhouse. they can handle more sugar in the diet than in the winter time when you're not exposed to sunshine. So I think seasonal eating should be a consideration. I also believe this idea of adaptability, of changing when you actually eat, timing-wise. So maybe one day, quote unquote, intermittent fast, skip breakfast, you know, eat a late breakfast or you know, maybe a later lunch and dinner. So you eat within a 6 to 8 hour window, what they call daily intermittent fasting. And then the next day, don't do that. And then maybe the next day, you can do a water fast or a bone broth fast or a, you know, vegetable juice fast. And I love the idea of changing it up, because really in the end, what is the goal? I firmly believe the goal isn't necessarily to drop weight, even though, and maybe some people just tune me out here, but the firm belief is to get the body well, is to be healthy. And when you're healthy, your body will go to the ideal weight. So to get it healthy, it's about learning to adapt to it. Because let's say that your body all of a sudden got a chronic, or you got a viral infection or a bacterial infection. Your body's got to fight that. If your body's not used to adapting to environment and the changes around, all of a sudden now having to adapt to a bacteria or virus attacking you, not going to be great. So if we're constantly kind of challenging our body to adapt rather than we fall in the same routine, we do the exact same stuff all the time, now anytime something comes up, our body can handle that because it's adaptable, right? And it's this idea that maybe we shouldn't eat the same stuff all the time, so the seasonal eating, and then the idea that we should change the timing of when we actually eat food, right, to kind of keep the body on edge. And then also looking at the fact that your genetic blueprint, your genomic blueprint, you know, your expression of your genes is different than mine. You know, I was born in Minnesota. You were born in, what, Australia?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we were born on different parts of the world, you know. But, so I'll give you an example. I had a client, she super diligent. Like, whatever I said, she would do it, and then she would ask, is there anything else I can do? Like, I mean, it was follow through, right? And I'm like, let's, you know, she wasn't horribly overweight, but she was a little overweight, and she's like, I just want to drop some weight. I want to get my body ideal. I'm like, great. You know, let's obviously go through the natural, what I would call like functional medicine protocols to get the body well, and then we'll try to throw some added things in to help kind of speed up this process, and just wasn't dropping it. And she went low carb, and then I'm like, have you tried ketosis, nutritional ketosis? And then she did that, and she's like, it's just not working. Checked her genetics or her genomics. So we ran a 23andMe. I took the raw data, input it into my information, and one of the genes that I love to look at in this category is PLIN and the number 1. So PLIN1. And I looked at it for her, and she was, I can't remember if she was a CT or a TT, either a hetero or a homozygous, but her readout, I remember though, said that she actually needs more carbs than somebody that has a different variation of this gene in order to actually lose weight. You know, and especially in the weight loss industry, all you hear about, especially right now, is ketogenic, ketosis, Atkins, low carb, you know, all these things like cut. And for her, you know, it was actually adding in some starchy carbs. It was actually adding fruit back into her diet that she had completely cut out. And then all of a sudden she started losing weight. And she's like, do you think I should go back to ketosis? And I'm like, wait a minute, back up. Like, eating carbs, you're actually losing some weight? Yeah. I'm like, maybe that is really what your body is craving. Yeah. You know, and from a research standpoint,
healthy carbs, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't give you
donuts.
Does not give you a get out of jail free card, you know, all this garbage, carbohydrate, you know, processed food in America type thing. But
most of the white stuff is just no good.
Right. Yeah. But for her, you know, when you look at research, the PLIN1 gene, if you have, I believe it's the CC homozygous, that means under 140 carbs a day, you do best with, and you'll lose weight. That's my body type. If you're a CT or a TT, now you actually want 140, 144 carbs or more, and you'll actually lose weight that way. Mm-hmm. So it's so interesting where, you know, there's so many fads with the diet, right? Ketogenic, gluten-free, Atkins, low carb, raw, vegan, you know, I mean, the paleo, right? The list goes on, and every year it's something different or some variation of it. And I really believe it's not that we're supposed to like be one perfect diet, but we're supposed to understand more of our blueprint, which I think genomics can give us a really good look at that. And then also this idea of adaptability, that we really should kind of change it up.
Just quickly, I wanted to go over to chiropractic, because that's your training, that's your background, and you worked in clinical practice with that for many years. So can that be a help for somebody? Can it be a cause? It sounds really bizarre. Like, could you lose weight by going to a chiropractor? I mean, it sounds crazy, but is that possible?
Yeah, well, it's a piece to the puzzle.
Yeah.
So I don't believe there's one thing that's going to be the thing that's going to fix everybody.
Yeah.
And really that's what we're looking for in our society, is what's this magic pill? What's this quick fix? And it's like, what if what's going to get you well and get you to an ideal weight isn't a quick fix? Mm-hmm. What if it's a lifestyle? And part of the lifestyle, I believe chiropractic's really important. I'm a trained chiropractor. When I owned my office, I saw over 130,000, or I had over 130,000 different adjustments on patients. So I have quite a bit of experience in that arena. And one of the things that I saw to be the biggest change chiropractic-wise was looking to actually change the structure. So let's say that somebody sleeps with a pillow at night and it's really thick, so it pushes their head forward and it's there for 8 hours every night. And that starts to lose the curve. Let's say somebody was in a car accident, you played sports, football, volleyball, gymnastics is absolutely really rough on young girls' spines. And all of a sudden now we don't have an ideal curve. Those nerves, those nerves in the neck area, in that curve, go right to the thyroid, which is a metabolism organ. So if the nerves aren't innervating, or the brain can't communicate to the thyroid optimally, then the thyroid's not going to function optimally. And so thyroid dysfunction could literally be a physical dysfunction of the spine structure, or part of it, right? Chronic infection can actually affect the thyroid. Heavy metal toxicity, mercury loves to bind on the thyroid specifically. So all these pieces could actually affect, quote unquote, the thyroid, which then could, quote unquote, affect weight. So if we just dealt with, let's say we just dealt with detoxification, but we didn't deal with chronic infection, or we didn't deal with reshaping the spine, now we're not going to get the same results. And it's about identifying, okay, for you individually, what are your issues, right? If you don't have a great curve in your neck, what can you do? Adjustments are great. Different forms of traction, like corrective chiropractors can give you. I remember I gave you a cervical neck roll to lay on, to help with your curve. It's really, I believe, putting all the pieces together that's going to get the result you're looking for. And if the only result you're looking for is weight loss, imagine if you just were truly healthy overall, and what would your life be like?
Wow.
And that's the goal. That's the goal, is true overall wellness and health. Weight loss is cosmetic. Yes. Is it a sign that there's something going on? Yeah, absolutely. Could it be just lifestyle habits? Yeah. Could it be toxicity? Yeah. Could it be physical trauma? Yeah. Could it be emotional trauma? Yeah. And it gets a little overwhelming when you know all the pieces. But now you want to look at yourself and say, okay, what happened? Well, I was in a car accident 8 years ago. I did get made fun of when I was young about being, under or overweight, and maybe that could be a factor in my life right now. Yeah, I did grow up in the Northeast or the Midwest, and there was a lot of ticks and Lyme disease. That could be part of it. I remember I did have mono when I was in college. All these different things you want to think back, and it's putting the pieces together that's really going to give us the best tools to fix ourselves.
I'm Dr. Daniel Newsom. I'm a naturopathic physician, osteopath, and doctor of Oriental medicine. And today we are discussing weight loss. Weight loss is an interesting subject. I always tell patients that the only thing easier than losing weight is finding it. And they usually laugh at that, but it's very true. The multi-million-dollar industry of weight loss, in my opinion, is fairly ineffective. I don't think they're correcting much of anything. I think there's, again, it's fairly easy to lose weight. There's very easy formulas. You reduce calorie intake and increase your activity, your body will lose weight. That's just a fundamental, and the entire industry is based off of that formula. There are things like stimulants and so on and so forth that can increase the nervous activity of your body so that your caloric expenditure because your nervous activity goes up. But the thing about both of these formulas is that they aren't correcting anything. And so what happens with these poor folks that are trying to lose weight is they lose weight, they come off of their program, they put it all back on, usually with a little more, and then they go on another program, they lose the weight, and they stop that program, put it all back on with a little extra, and then they lose the weight again, and so on and so forth. And it just becomes a expensive, difficult, and ineffective process. So today what I want to discuss is why do we need to lose weight? Why is it that we're putting on weight faster than we've in any generation ever before? Why is it that there's more obesity today than there ever has been in our country and around the world? So let's discuss some of this. What is causing the astronomical explosion of obesity in our society? There's multiple factors. One, we are less active than we've ever been. We have more conveniences. We don't necessarily have to walk everywhere anymore. We don't have to ride horses. We don't have to plow fields. We don't have to necessarily crawl on the ground and dig up food and these types of things. Everything's very convenient for us. We can pretty much run to the refrigerator and get whatever we'd need to eat. And we can, when that runs out, we can hop in the car and run down to the supermarket and go buy some more. And so there's, our level of activity isn't what it once was. And at the same time, the calorie density of the food that we're consuming is way higher than it's ever been. So that's kind of a perfect storm from a activity and nutrition standpoint. And so your basic weight loss industry formula does address that by increasing activity and decreasing the caloric intake. But when someone has been inactive for a long enough period of time and they have flooded their system with too many calories for too long, there's metabolic damage that happens, and exercise and reduction of caloric intake doesn't fix that. Okay, which leaves the person in a very, very tough situation. Okay, let's talk about basic things like insulin resistance. Okay, now insulin resistance, if you take your cell, has what are called insulin receptor sites. Okay, those are places for insulin to plug into. Okay, this being insulin, this is the receptor site. Insulin plugs into the cell. The insulin opens the cell so the cell can receive sugar, so the cell can metabolize the sugar and create energy for the cell to do its job. That's all great, but if you have been exposed to toxins and they've caused oxidative damage of the insulin receptor sites in your cells, and those cells are warped, okay, they're not straight, so the key can fit into the hole. They're kind of offset, or if the cell has warped in such a way due to oxidative damage, the insulin can't act on the cell properly. And we call that insulin resistance. Okay, inflammation causes insulin resistance. Flooding the system with too many calories causes insulin resistance. Oxidative damage, okay, which is what happens when we're exposed to toxins. Okay, our cells, especially the fatty component, the fatty acid component of the cells, oxidize. And when they do, the cell itself warps. It gets rifts in it. In certain things like insulin receptor sites don't operate properly then. Okay, they don't line up well for the insulin to fit in. And So there's multiple reasons for insulin resistance. And the less active we are, the fewer insulin receptor sites our cells will produce. So with inactivity, we have a reduction in the production of insulin receptor sites on a cellular level, and that causes means there's fewer places in the cell for insulin to plug into. Interesting fact is that your utilization of sugar in your body occurs 90% in your liver. Every cell in your liver should have right around 200,000 insulin receptor sites. There's more insulin receptor sites in liver cells than in any other cells in the body. And that's where insulin's supposed to have most of its function. Okay, about 90% of the function of insulin occurs in the liver. Well, what if you've been nutritionally deficient for years and you've been exposed to toxins all those times? Now, for all that time, you've been exposed to toxins, you've been nutrient deficient for years and exposed to toxins for years. The liver, if it doesn't have the nutrients to make the enzymes that it needs in order to detoxify itself, it stops detoxifying itself. When that happens, the liver, instead of being a filter, becomes a garbage can. Okay? When the liver becomes a garbage can, it stores toxins instead of filtering them. And those toxins cause the liver filtration cells to become fatty deposits. Okay, and we call that a fatty liver. The average American is well on their way to developing a fatty liver disease, normally by the time they're 40 years old. And so that's astronomically terrible. When the liver goes bad, your ability to metabolize insulin goes bad, and your ability to metabolize thyroid hormones goes bad. Okay, and so we've talked a little bit about insulin deficiency or insulin resistance. We need to talk about thyroid issues also. That would be our next step. We have lack of activity, excessive amount of intake of raw nutrients or raw materials, too many calories basically. We have fatty liver disease that develops. We have insulin resistance, and we have thyroid dysfunction that we need to discuss now. Thyroid dysfunction occurs normally in tandem with insulin resistance. They almost always happen at the same time. Okay, this is very little is said about that. There's a lot to be said. A lot of people are talking about insulin resistance. What people aren't talking about is the fact that insulin resistance and thyroid issues normally occur at the same time. There's also evidence that's pointing to the possibility that thyroid problems are a precursor to insulin resistance. So there's the possibility, we're not sure at the moment, but there's a possibility that you have to have a thyroid issue before you can have insulin resistance. And all of these are contributing factors to obesity. Now, if the thyroid is not operating properly, okay, thyroid hormones, their function is to activate the mitochondria in our cell. Well, mitochondria are the portion of our cell that generates energy for the cell to carry out its job. So if you have a muscle cell, the mitochondria in the muscle cell produce the energy for the muscle cell to work. If you have a brain cell, The mitochondria produce the energy for the brain cell to work. You have a cell in your heart, a heart cell, same thing, okay? Depending on the metabolic activity and the biological importance of the tissue, there will be more mitochondria in certain tissues than in other tissues. So you take a fat cell, which might have only one mitochondria, or you take a liver cell that'll have up to 2,000 mitochondria per cell. You take a brain cell, will have up to 2,000 mitochondria per cell. You take a cell from the heart, you might have up to 2,000 mitochondria per cell. You take a well-trained athlete, take a muscle cell, you could have 1,000 to 1,500 mitochondria per cell, okay? But you take someone that's not well-trained and they may only have a couple hundred, okay? So your metabolic activity is determined by the activity of the mitochondria in every one of your cells. And the mitochondria need to be activated by thyroid hormones. So if there's something wrong in the process of thyroid hormone, either production or metabolism, then the mitochondria don't get activated, and neither does your metabolism. Okay, so your metabolism gets flatlined if the mitochondria don't get activated. Okay, so it's paramount. Well, so let's talk about this for a minute. What's thyroid hormone function look like? We got your hypothalamus, the emotional center of your brain, monitors your blood levels of thyroid hormones. When they start to drop, it tells the pituitary gland inside your brain that we need more thyroid hormones. The pituitary gland produces what's called thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. That goes from the pituitary down to your thyroid in your neck, and it tells your thyroid to produce more hormone. Well, your thyroid produces predominantly a hormone called T4. And when it produces T4, T4 goes off to the liver and gets converted into what's called T3. Now, your thyroid does produce some T3, but not the total amount that is necessary, okay? So once T3 gets converted from T4, that T3 goes out to your cells, and that's what goes out and activates the mitochondria in every one of the cells of the body. And that's your brain cells to your skin cells, okay? All cells have to the mitochondria in all cells have to be activated by thyroid hormones. So that's how thyroid affects your metabolism, okay? So we've covered lack of activity, excessive caloric intake, insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, thyroid dysfunction, and now we got to talk about mitochondrial dysfunction. Okay, so our last one, mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondrial dysfunction occurs when the mitochondria have been poisoned or starved. Okay, those are the two things that cause mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondria are interesting in that mitochondria aren't human. Mitochondria are actually microbes, and they have different DNA than humans, but they are symbiotic microorganisms. They can't exist without our cells, and our cells can't exist without them. It's really interesting. I go back to the Bible, Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. In the first book of the Bible, it says that God, the Almighty, created man out of the dust of the earth. And the dust of the earth has three basic groups of components. We have soil is made out of water, varying amounts in ratios of the periodic table, and microbes. Okay? When we look at the human body is made of water, varying ratios of the periodic table, and microbes. Okay, and mitochondria are one of those groups of microbes that we're made of. And they're essential. We cannot live without mitochondria. Our cells die and they stop functioning and then die if the mitochondria die. Okay, and the primary causes of mitochondrial dysfunction or mitochondrial death is poisoning and starvation. Okay, there's things like heavy metals and glyphosate from pesticides, other herbicides, well, glyphosate and herbicides, not pesticides, but it kills both. But you have glyphosate and herbicides, you have other insecticides and other even preservatives in food and things like that, that all are poisonous to mitochondria. When they get into the mitochondria, it kills them. The mitochondria stops functioning. Well, if we can't regrow mitochondria fast enough, our metabolism gets shot. Okay, so toxicity massively reduces our metabolism. So if we become toxic with something, it will slow our metabolism down by killing our mitochondria. Okay, this is very, very paramount in obesity. Okay, one of the end results of mitochondrial dysfunction is swelling. Okay, and I challenge you to, whether you are dealing with a weight issue or not, go to your local shopping center or mall and just sit there for 2 hours and watch the population. Okay, what you'll notice is a very large amount of our population is large, but they're not large just because they're quote unquote fat. What it is they are swollen. Okay, they're swollen like balloons. Okay, and that water swelling is because the mitochondria in their cells have been poisoned and things aren't being metabolized. Okay, this is very, very it's very alarming, because mitochondrial dysfunction will lead to almost every known disease that we have. Every disease known to man can be caused by mitochondrial dysfunction. So our next thing is mitochondria need to be fed. Okay, and if we don't feed them, they do what? Starve. Okay, so if we poison the mitochondria and we starve them at the same time, how are we supposed to be healthy? Okay, if we have no energy being produced for our cells to operate, our cells don't operate. So one of the fundamental physical laws is action requires energy. And so let's recap real quick. We've got factors that cause obesity: lack of activity, excessive caloric intake, insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, thyroid dysfunction, and finally mitochondrial dysfunction. So my goodness, we got these 6 factors, and we look at the weight loss industry, and the weight loss industry does address the first 2 factors. And then a lot of the other techniques that they use actually cause harm to the rest of the factors. Okay, so the weight loss industry uses the formula that if you reduce your caloric intake and increase your activity, you burn more calories, you expend more fuel than you're taking in. Therefore, you have to use stored fuel, which is what we have right over here. Right here. Okay, that's all our stored fuel, right? Well, if we don't take in as much fuel and we increase our activity and burn more fuel, then we start burning some of the stored fuel that we have. Okay, and we call that fat. Okay, and that's all well and good as long as the other factors are operating, okay? It's as long as you're not insulin resistant, as long as you don't have a fatty liver, okay? And that's as long as your thyroid's operating properly, and that's as long as your mitochondria are operating properly. That first technique in the weight loss industry will work if you have these other 4 factors operating properly. If these other 4 factors aren't operating properly, it doesn't matter how little you eat or how active you get, you're not going to effectively lose weight or keep it off. It's just a fact. The next thing in the weight loss industry is the use of stimulants or thermogenic nutrients, which I'm not 100% against, but I'm also not a pro-thermogenic nutrient consumer. And that's this, and I'll tell you why. If you throw an accelerant into a system that's dysfunctional, you accelerate the dysfunction. Let me repeat that. If you use stimulants in a broken down system, you accelerate how fast the system breaks down. Okay? You're not fixing anything. Okay? It may help for a little while, but it's going to create a bigger problem. Okay? So that's my issue with using stimulants and thermogenic products and things like that. Not that they're totally bad. They do have their place, just like exercise does, just like calorie restriction does have its place. And all of these are beneficial. We'll get to all this in a little bit, but by themselves, I think they're actually dangerous. They can actually compound the underlying metabolic issues that are causing the person to gain weight to begin with. So that brings us to, so what do we do about this, Doc? Okay, how do we lose weight, or how do we improve our metabolism so the weight goes away and stays away? That's the real question, right? How do we fix the problem so that this doesn't come back? Okay, because again, remember what I said at the beginning. The only thing easier than losing weight is finding it. All right, you drop those 30 pounds and you can find 35 real easy. Okay. So what do we do about weight loss? Well, first off, we do have to increase activity. Okay, because healing is proportionate to blood flow. The best way to stimulate blood flow is to get active. Start moving, okay? Without movement, there's no reason for the blood to flow anymore, okay? It's just natural. The more active you are, the more blood has to flow, right? So, increasing activity, number 1. It's paramount. You have to increase activity. If you want to lose weight, if you want to correct your metabolism, you have to become more active, period. There are times where increasing activity is actually counterproductive. Now, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Well, not if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, okay? Not if your thyroid's not working properly. If your mitochondria are not operating properly and you increase your energy expenditure. Remember, your mitochondria are the ones that produce energy for your body to operate. If they're not working and you expend more energy, you're going to stress your mitochondria even more. Okay, so first, sometimes when the metabolism is so bad, we actually have to reduce calories by eating healthier, okay? Not just by eating less. We have to change our choices, okay? And in those cases, typically, I have a basic formula that I use. It is, when you look at your plate, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, half of it has to be vegetables. Okay, has to be green vegetables, yellow vegetables, red vegetables, purple vegetables. We have to have half of your diet has to be vegetables. And at least half of those vegetables have to be raw. Okay? The other quarter of your plate has to be fruit, and preferably raw fruit. Okay? Then the other the other quarter has to be protein. Okay? We've got to give, with raw fruits and vegetables, you get nutrients. You get nutrients being vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, the things that your body needs in order to rebuild itself. You also get small amounts of protein, small amounts of fatty acids, and you get very healthy carbohydrates. And those carbohydrates are what your body uses as an energy source. Now, when we supply protein, we give the body protein, and also the other thing that should be involved here is fats, oils in particular. Avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil, these types of things need to be added in with the protein. Okay, what these things do is they stabilize your blood sugar, and they give your body the raw materials, the raw materials to rebuild itself. Okay, it's kind of like an old ran down house. You need new raw materials to rebuild it. Okay, and so to fix the ran down house, we need to supply good, healthy raw materials. Okay, so 3 times a day you're eating 50% vegetables, 25% fruit, and then the other 25% on your plate is proteins and fats. Okay, so we take this diet. You may need to have some lab work to determine whether or not you have insulin resistance or thyroid dysfunction. I also recommend don't just rely on the lab work. Take your body temperature before you get out of bed every morning. Okay, and record that. Okay, don't get out of bed. When you wake up in the morning, take your body temperature, typically with a digital thermometer. Record that. Okay, if it's under 97, or if it's close to 97 or below, you have mitochondrial dysfunction. Okay, if it gets 96 or lower, you have thyroid dysfunction. It also could be adrenal gland dysfunction. Okay, and here's an interesting thing: when you're insulin resistant, your body requires more cortisol in order to operate properly. Okay, cortisol causes you to hold water. Okay, which is swelling. All right. And what happens when you become swollen? You become inflamed. Okay? What happens with inflammation? Inflammation damages insulin receptor sites, and they don't operate as well. Okay? So it becomes a really vicious cycle. If you become insulin resistant, you need more cortisol to operate, yada, 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 and it just becomes a really nasty cycle. So we go back to temperature. If your body temperature is under 98, you have mitochondrial dysfunction to some extent. If it gets down into the 96s on the Fahrenheit scale, you have thyroid adrenal issues. Okay, if it goes below that, you definitely have, you got all 3, okay? And that will give you, that little test of taking your body temperature in the morning will tell you whether you have a thyroid issue or a metabolic issue before it'll show up on a blood test, on lab tests. It'll years before even. So there's that. Now, once we've changed the diet, we need to supply nutrients. Okay, remember, if our mitochondria are starving, they can't operate. Okay, so we got to give the body nutrients. We also need to start to detoxify. Okay, if our mitochondria are being poisoned, if we don't remove the poison, what's going to happen? The mitochondria are going to continue to die, right? So, detoxification. We change the diet. We start to detoxify. There's Detox for Life is my book. I have 4 different detoxification programs in there. We have 4 protocols that you could follow. I'd suggest you take a look at that. There are, once you've changed your diet, you start your detoxification, we start increasing your nutrient intake. You need to have vitamins, you need to have minerals, you need to have phytonutrients, you need to have enzymes, you need to have probiotics. You know, those are the 5 basic things that you need to be putting into your system to rebuild it, to feed those mitochondria. I have an herbal supplement called Super Earth Energy that is designed to enhance and to heal and protect mitochondria. It's designed to be a mitochondria food. You can also then, once you start feeling better, you start losing a little bit of weight, and you start getting some energy back, then we can start exercise. Okay, and once we start exercising, we need to be doing stretching, need to be walking. You start with light exercise. Don't go to the gym and start pumping iron. Okay, all you're asking for is injury. Okay, start easy. Take steps. Don't expect to lose weight overnight. Okay, if you lose weight overnight, you'll gain it the next day. Okay, because the only thing easier than losing weight is finding it. All right, so once you start your exercise routine, you start walking. I like to have people do rebounding. Get on a rebounder and bounce on a rebounder. Excellent exercise. And start stretching. Yoga, that's another good form of exercise to start and begin with. Then 2-3 months down the road, as you've adapted to these types of exercise, then we can start going to the gym. Then we can start doing more intense fitness type exercise and things. There are key nutrients to mitochondrial health. Fulvic acid is something that if you research me, you'll find a lot of information about fulvic acid. Fulvic acid is a mitochondrial food. It's something mitochondria love. And consuming fulvic acid will help heal and promote the propagation of more of the mitochondria in your system. Another thing is cordyceps. The medicinal mushroom cordyceps is excellent for healing, protecting, and propagating mitochondria. The medicinal mushroom chaga is another one. Does the same thing. Helps with rebuilding, and propagating more mitochondria in your system. Eating raw food. There's research that says that the mitochondria in fruits and vegetables, if consumed raw, will add to the amount of mitochondria in your system. Not only do you consume the nutrients from raw fruits and vegetables, but the nutrients contain mitochondria. And when you consume raw fruits and vegetables, you're consuming the mitochondria in those raw fruits and vegetables, and they get incorporated into your body, into your system. Remember, they're microbes. Okay? As you take in those microbes, they add to the number of microbes in your system. Okay, so raw foods. Also, probiotics. Believe it or not, probiotics are very, very beneficial to correcting metabolic issues. If you're deficient in certain microbes, you will become insulin resistant. If you're deficient in other microbes, you'll have thyroid problems. If you're deficient in other microbes, you'll gain weight in certain areas of your body. and so on and so forth. So by supplying those beneficial microbes into your system, you start correcting the metabolic problems from your gut out. Okay, so marvelous, marvelous things. Other things, L-carnitine, the amino acid L-carnitine, acetyl L-carnitine in particular, very, very good for improving mitochondrial function. Okay, they like L-carnitine. Alpha-lipoic acid, especially R-alpha-lipoic acid. That is another very good mitochondria promoting nutrient. It also helps to detoxify mitochondria, as does fulvic acid. So the poisons that get in there and start poisoning the mitochondria, we can use fulvic acid, cordyceps, chaga, alpha-lipoic acid. Those are things that pull those poisons out of the mitochondria, get them away from them so they don't get poisoned to death, right? Also, things like iodine help. Iodine is very helpful in the mitochondria, the liver, and the thyroid. Iodine is very beneficial for healing insulin receptor sites, as is chromium polynicotinate. Polynicotinate chromium has niacin, which is very beneficial for insulin receptor sites, and as is chromium. So these are other nutrients that would be very helpful. Adaptogens. Adaptogens are a group of herbal remedies that enable the body to adapt. And so one of the things that they do is they promote mitochondrial health. Okay, they feed the mitochondria. These are cordyceps mushrooms, chaga mushrooms, eleuthero, rhodiola, ashwagandha, ginseng, virtually all forms of ginseng. Even reishi mushrooms are very good adaptogens. Turkey tail mushrooms, and then spices like ginger and turmeric and cloves. Those are all very good adaptogens that help and promote mitochondrial health. Let's see here. Once a person has changed their diet, started providing nutrients to their system, detoxified their system, started light exercise, okay, and they get to where they actually are feeling like they have energy again, like they're coming alive again, okay. The reason they feel like they're coming alive again is because they're growing new mitochondria. Those mitochondria are coming to life, and they're propagating more mitochondria, and they're getting more energy centers in their cells, and they feel more alive, more vibrant, okay. As that happens, and people tend to have more energy, okay, that's when you need to start upping the activity. You need to increase activity at that point. That's when your body will start sculpting. It'll start going back to what it was when you were younger, you know. It'll go back to, or you can actually create a whole new body by doing this, you know, and get a whole new physique. Do check your A1C, okay, check your blood sugar, check thyroid hormones and thyroid metabolism. Check those things with your doctor. Find out where those are. Those are all important starting points to know where we are, know what's going on. But the basic things that we've talked about here today are what it takes to correct the underlying metabolic issues that cause people to gain weight. And it's what has to be fixed in order for people to stop regaining the weight after they lose it.
Dr. J, you've got some props for us. So let's pick them up, let's check them out. So.
Yeah. Let's put them up here on the table. Whoa.
here's that one, so I'll put this up. Whoa. And there you go.
Yeah, so I've got a couple.
Do you want to start with the weirdest thing first?
Yeah, the big chunk of fat here.
Yeah.
It's got a little jiggle to it right here. So, yeah, so this is 5 pounds of fat, and it's mind-boggling when you actually think about this is 5 pounds. I mean, it's so big, but it helps to kind of give perception of what 5 pounds is. So when somebody says, "Oh, I'm only 5 or 10 pounds overweight," it's like, well, there's a lot of fat cells here. And the fat cells is what stores toxins. So when you're exposed to toxins, your body tries to excrete as many toxins as it can, and the toxins it can excrete, it's going to store, and it's going to store them into fat. So I'd like to kind of think of fat cells as, oh, it's not I ate too much fat. Fat cells, it's my toxic reservoirs. So we got to start emptying those reservoirs. We got to start detoxing the body. We got to start clearing the toxins out, because once we clear them out, then the body's got no use for excessive amounts of this. So kind of gross. You can feel that thing.
So some people are carrying around this much fat, like in unwanted areas.
Oh yeah,
like
that's only 5 pounds. So imagine, I mean, how many people are more overweight than that? And there's also the skinny fat people. Skinny fat is they look fine cosmetically, but they have like fatty liver, for instance. Fatty liver is very common in really skinny people. So just because somebody doesn't externally look fat, they can still have excessive amounts internal fat, where they just don't have much muscle. It's pretty much all just like bone and more fat, soft tissue type things that are surrounding the organs.
Wow. So now let's say I've got this, it's interesting that with men, a lot of the time you've got this gathering here, right here in the belly. Right?
Yeah, well,
why does it gather here?
It's an area they can carry it commonly, and it's also a lot to do with our lifestyle. So we sit so much. We sit, eat, and we don't do things that actually engage big muscle groups like glutes and quads.
Yeah.
So you see this is epidemic in our society of men and women literally with no butt, like flat, and then bellies.
Yeah.
And we really want the opposite. We want curvature in the glute region. It means we're doing squats, we're engaging that. And when we engage big muscles, that our body kicks the metabolism up really quick doing that. So we want to engage big muscle groups, such as doing like deadlifts and squats, and start getting butts, and our body will start redepositing, it'll start burning fat, but it'll start moving, like you'll start building muscle and you'll start losing, if you will, width on your waist if it's excessive. So
yeah, wow. And so is it possible that weight, so weight could obviously gain here in the arms, but then there's not really many vital organs to protect here, and same with everywhere else except for like obviously around the heart is a vital organ, but then there's a lot of vital organs here around the gut. I'm curious as to if there's any correlation, because we talked about toxins. Actually, they're weaponized to kill. Like, they're toxic, right? So the fat cells are protecting us from the toxins. Is there any correlation there in terms of like there being fat gathering here because it's protecting us against toxins?
Well, yeah, fat in general is a protector for toxins. Yeah. So there's different kinds of fat. Like people can have, like for instance, guys can have a really hard belly.
Yeah.
And that's actually a more dangerous type of fat. But it's typically easier to lose that fat than it is the stuff that's just kind of float jiggly fat. Yeah. That's not quite as dangerous, but it's actually a little tougher to lose, quote unquote, based on the science and research.
Got it. Because part of the reason why I'm asking these questions is because I'm curious as to where is the correlation between this unwanted fat that's sitting around the body and disease? Because I don't think a lot of people really understand the severity of the connection between those two things. We know that unwanted weight is inflammation.
Yep.
Right? It's true?
Yeah, so think of it this way. So this is 5 pounds. For every 1 pound of fat, there's an extra 7 miles of blood vessels for that 1 pound. So let's say that you're 10 pounds overweight. Now you have an extra, and these are microscopic, very small capillaries and blood vessels, but still, let's say you're 10 pounds overweight. Now you have an extra 70 miles of blood vessels in the body. Could that potentially make your heart work harder than it needs to? Right? So we know that being overweight has a cardiovascular risk factor. Could that be part of why it is? Could it be part of because of the toxicity issue? So the more overweight you are, the more arteries your body has to build to actually, you know, support this, right?
Yeah.
To get all the function to do what it needs to, and the
it's
more
unnecessary.
Yeah, it's really unnecessary. So when we can get back to more of an ideal body weight, now our body can say, oh, we don't need all these extra blood vessels, less work for the heart, cardiovascular system is stronger, better, because it's not having to work as hard.
What about things like cancer, diseases like cancer?
Yeah, well, there's such a big link of toxicity in cancer.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you have a reservoir of toxins, you're just going to be more at risk of the common diseases that we see in our society. Right. And they're common not because we're born to get them, they're common because we need to make different lifestyle choices, and we need to understand our bodies better to, you know, figure out what we need to do to support it rather than, you know, not support it.
Got it. So fat cells, unwanted fat gap, you know, fat toxins, should we be like seeing these things as one in the same? No.
Yeah, if somebody has a really big belly, just think of it as that's just a big old tub of toxins, right? And we got to clear those out.
And then that's very serious in that sense. You know what I mean? Like, there's no need to be affectionate with that particular thing. There's absolutely never any justification for any shaming towards self or others, like, because that shouldn't be true for anything. Like, I mean, we don't, like, if we're classing unwanted weight as either potentially disease causing or even a disease, right? Then in the same way, we should never shame anyone with any other disease, right? And ourselves, like if you had cancer, do you think that it would be productive to shame yourself for having cancer?
No.
The first thing to do is to stop blaming yourself, right?
Mindset, to know, you know, to be grateful for where you're at now, be grateful for your body, to love yourself. Some of the most powerful emotions you can have. Having fear, having anger, having hate, you know, and like just despair, and, you know, this feeling where you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh my gosh, that's not going to heal the body. What's going to heal the body is gratitude, you know, peace, acceptance, you know, happiness. Yeah. Happiness isn't when you, quote unquote, get to your ideal weight. Happiness is now. Happiness, why can't we be happy now? It's the journey that's our life. It's not the destination. So why can't we be happy now? And when we're happy now, we're more likely to get to, quote unquote, the destination we're looking at, and we're going to enjoy the road rather than beat ourselves up, hate what we do, hate ourselves, and then even in that state, we're less likely to get to that, you know, end point. But, you know, love life. Be in the moment now and be happy now.
That's wonderful, and I think you've helped to answer as well the relapse. I've heard statistics go as high as 95 to 99% of people that lose weight and have these amazing results and even appear on these infomercials of like, look at this woman, oh, look how fit she is. The relapse rate being as high as 95 to 99%. How tragic, right? And so then you have to assess like what could be off, right? And then I think that some of these motivations, I would go straight to the core. If you're doing it to feel like you're worth something because you're worthless without it, then that's a perfect way to fall back. Because, you know, it's interesting what I've discovered about my own human nature, and the Bible talks about these things. Often we will try to test love, right? So, for example, you know, I think we've all done it if we're married or have any kind of relationship. We test a relationship to see if they actually love us.
Yep.
Right? So then we can test. And so what, yeah, so as in if we're doing it because of aesthetics or just to feel like we're worth something, then we're ultimately going to go, well, it's ultimately we'll start to feel worthless, and then we'll start acting worthless.
Yeah. And that's the important thing to look at is this is a long-term plan. This isn't a short-term plan. This is to think big picture, like what do you want for your life? What do you want for your body? What do you want for your health? And then start acting in accordance to it, and you'll get that. There isn't a magic pill. There isn't a quick fix. And everything that is magic pill or quick fix is like stomach stapling. We now know, like, horrible. I mean, they're not the way to go, because it's nothing to do with you as a person. It's saying, you know what, we'll make your stomach smaller and force you to eat smaller, but over time you can start eating more and more and stretch it back out again, you know? Like, there's just, we have to look at ourselves from a foundation and principle of, what do we believe? What do we do? And then look at that and start changing that. And that's what's really going to give us, you know, happiness. That's what's going to give us the result we're looking for, whatever that is.
So having fat in our body that's excessive, right? And then toxins, we're seeing these as one and the same in that these, fat accumulates where toxins are, right? So then once we see these as together, now when we look, okay, now toxins, it's clear in most people's minds, toxins, disease, right? So
yeah, and also hormone
disease.
dysfunction, right? You could throw me so many things on fat, toxins, hormone dysfunction, disease. That they're all run on the same page.
And then when we say disease, we're talking about chronic disease.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the heavyweights that a lot of us are really quite fearful of: cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, and maybe I'm going too far there. I don't know. But
well, let's look at toxins as increasing inflammation. So any disease that's linked with chronic inflammation, that could be part of it. And also toxins are linked with immune suppression. So anything that's linked with affecting the immune system. So anything affecting inflammation, anything affecting immune system could be at risk factor of when you have excess toxins, when you have excess fat. So looking at the big picture, it's not cosmetic, but it's disease risk. And that can easily help shift people.
Yep. So do you see unwanted weight as potentially causative of chronic disease? I mean, you see,
yeah, absolutely.
What kind of diseases?
Yeah, well, the top diseases right now. So I would say heart disease, cancer, diabetes, are the top three. Alzheimer's, dementia is a rising epidemic, and there's a huge link of basically calling Alzheimer's dementia as type 3 diabetes of the brain. So it's blood sugar issues, it's inflammation, and so I feel like all of those are linked with not being well, which excessive weight, excessive toxins are going to get thrown into that and be a risk factor for it.
Thank you. All right. So can you show us what the rest of this little things are? Yeah.
So I've got a couple ketone meters here. One is from Ketone Nix. This is a breath meter. So this is, you can plug it into your computer and then breathe through it, and it'll give you some lights. And based on the color of light, it'll tell you whether you're in ketosis or not. And essentially, when you're in ketosis, that's when your body's like in a fat burning stage. So Ketone X has a good breath meter for measuring ketones if you're going to try to do nutritional ketosis, which is different than diabetic ketoacidosis. This is a few years old. I brought these from home. This is a precision extra meter, and this will do blood glucose, but it also does blood ketones. So blood ketones are a little bit more accurate. The only downside is you're, pricking your finger, putting it on a ketone strip, not a blood glucose strip, a ketone strip, and then it's going to measure and tell you, what your blood ketones are. And when you're in ketosis, 0.5 millimoles per liter, I believe. 0.5 to 5 is kind of that ideal range that you want to be in. So if you're like, oh, I think I'm in ketosis, and finger prick and you're 0.2, you're not really in ketosis yet. And there is benefit of looking at blood glucose too, because as ketones go up, blood glucose should technically go down because your body's using ketones instead of sugar. So these are just a couple pretty inexpensive. Well, this is pretty inexpensive, the Precision Extra meter. The strips are a couple bucks a strip, so you can argue whether that's cheap or not. But the Ketone X, it's a couple $100 I think to get this. I've had this for a while now, but the nice thing is you don't have to buy strips to finger prick. You know what I mean?
You don't have to prick.
No, it's just breathing through here. So it's a one-time purchase. That's the one that I'm going to do. This would be the one you'd want to do.
Hey, yeah. and just show me how I breathe through that. I mean,
so you basically just would connect this all together, and it plugs in USB on the computer. So it plugs in. You can either use battery like this, or you can plug it into the computer. And then when you plug it in, it will, when you blow through it, it'll change colors, and that'll help give you an indicator of like the level of ketones that your body has.
Okay. And again, so with ketones, for those that are unaware of what a ketone is and why that's important, could you just give that in a nutshell?
Yes.
Because if you could get your body into ketosis, then you're off to the races when it comes to weight loss typically.
Yep. So your body either burns sugar or it burns fat for energy. And how you measure if it's burning fat or not is ketones. So glucose, which is sugar, burns really dirty in the body. It's like if you have a fireplace with logs and it's giving off black smoke. Ketones burning is like natural gas, very clean. Your brain loves it, but ketones is really a sign of your body burning fat. So if you measure your ketones and you don't have any ketone production, your body's not really burning fat, you know, or producing ketones to burn fat. It's primarily off of sugar. And that's primarily most of our society is a sugar burner. Burn, 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 all about sugar. And that's the up and down crashes, that's the weight gain. When you can start establishing ketones in your body or start producing ketones, then you're going to be a lot less crashes, but then you're also going to start burning fat as well.
Tell me, what's the feeling like? Because, I mean, you seem like a really empathetic person. What's the feeling you get when you feel the pain of somebody that's experiencing unwanted weight gain that they feel ashamed of?
I just want to douse that person with education, right? Because people who are suffering with the shame of excess weight carry that shame to a personal level, feeling like, oh, I just can't, you know, control myself, or that somehow it's their fault, which, of course, in a certain way, perhaps it is, but it's, I think, mostly stemming from lack of information, lack of education, which would then help drive better lifestyle choices. Okay, so I have worked with a number of clients in my nutrition practice, one in particular that comes to mind, who was seriously battling obesity and really doing everything that she possibly could. And it's quite stubborn when it becomes an advanced condition, right? And it's heartbreaking, right? So most people, what are the statistics? Half the people, or maybe 40% of Americans, are in some stage of insulin resistance or pre-diabetic. So this is the time to take note and get serious about lifestyle changes that can prevent that slippery slope of having it turn into metabolic syndrome with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. Alzheimer's has been recently nicknamed type 3 diabetes. And this is because in the process of blood sugar dysregulation, which I'll go into more in a second, there is a phenomenon called advanced glycation end products. And this is when the protein structures of our body in general, but with regard to Alzheimer's, the protein structures in our brain start to have sugar binding them together. So the plasticity of the brain starts to become less fluid, less malleable, and becomes rigid through the sugar basically, for an easy way to visualize it, the sugar sort of baking on to these protein structures and really limiting the normal way that a brain functions. So let's talk about blood sugar dysregulation for a second. In our society, who did not grow up eating sugar as a very young child? Right? Almost nobody. It's only our centenarians anymore, maybe, who grew up 100 years ago that way. But, so we're all introduced to sugar at a very young age, and sugar becomes synonymous with comfort. It becomes synonymous with celebration. It becomes synonymous with managing depression. There's so many emotional roots in our sugar consumption in our society, not to mention the biochemical addictiveness of it, that it fires up the same part of the brain as cocaine, right? So if we turn the hands of time back in human evolution, it's been in the last 400 years that sugar was introduced into our food supply. Okay, our biology does not evolve that quickly. We are 98% the same as our Paleolithic ancestors who lived 40,000 years ago. And so if just imagine being a Paleolithic nomad, what was the #1 issue in your life? Starvation, right? Imagine if every day you woke up and you had to go outside, wander out into the desert or the forest, and figure out what you're going to eat today, right? So our biology is hardwired to seek calorie sources, i.e. sugar, and we have beautiful balancing mechanisms that will help raise our blood sugar levels when we don't have food, in the case of famine, or if the game that we were hunting escaped, or after the agricultural revolution, if the crops we were tending failed for whatever reason. So we have 10 times more mechanisms in the body to raise blood sugar levels than we do to lower blood sugar levels. We only have one, and that's insulin, right? So we are dousing ourselves with sugar. The average American eats 150 pounds of sugar a year, whereas 100 years ago, the average person ate 10 pounds of sugar a year, right? So the effect of this blood sugar dysregulation is, first, hypoglycemia is the first mild stage of when our blood sugar is starting to not function normally. And the next stage is insulin resistance, where the blood sugar levels start to stay a little bit higher than they should. And from there, it's a slippery slope into type 2 diabetes, where the blood sugar levels stay considerably higher than they should and start to do damage. And at that point, when blood sugar levels are consistently higher than they should be, we have this process of AGEs. What's the acronym AGEs? Advanced glycation end products. And in the brain, this is what is now linked to type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's, and other forms of dementia.
Sharon, I'm interested in knowing about the issues around weight gain and weight loss. So let's dive into that. Let's look at all the causes, like unwanted weight gain. What's the source of the problem? Where's this all coming from?
I would like to answer that question in two different ways. In the broadest sense of it, I believe the issue has to do with depression. We're living in unprecedented times where our families are fractured. We have moved all over the country and all over the world, so we're not close to our families anymore. Spiritual traditions have become fractured. Our economics place an incredible burden, right? People are working so hard, especially in America. People are working so hard just to barely make ends meet. 80% of Americans say that they hate their jobs, right? There are so many modern day societal factors that create sadness and a sense of isolation, a sense of detachment, a void that can only be felt at a spiritual level. And so all of this creates a hunger, right? A deep spiritual type of hunger. And people are filling that hunger with sugar, okay? So then to get to how that sugar actually affects our body and our biochemistry that actually leads to the weight gain, well, I mean, I just answered your question. What leads to the weight gain is sugar, right? And when I say sugar, let's talk about what that word means, right? The teaspoon of white sugar is actually 50% glucose and 50% fructose. The word sugar gets used in our society to cover all kinds of other disaccharides. There's maltose, lactose. If you look on the side of a cereal box, you'll see, you know, a dozen different names for sugar, right? The other piece of sugar that's usually not considered is starches, so starchy carbohydrates. Bread, pasta, rice, all of the different kinds of grain, corn. These starchy carbohydrates, after we ingest them, when they move on down into the body very quickly breaks those starches apart, it literally breaks the bonds so that it breaks down into disaccharides, into sugar. Right? So when I'm talking about sugar in the diet, it's not just the added white teaspoons, but it's all of the starchy carbohydrates in our diet are basically synonymous with sugar. So if someone really wants to avoid the excess weight or needs to shed the excess weight, the number one thing is to really cut out all of the forms of simple sugar, table sugar, even the natural sugars. Honey, maple syrup are better. They have some other beneficial nutrients, but they're still sweeteners. And all of the starchy carbohydrates. Now, the tricky thing is when somebody actually cuts those things out of their diet, most people are left with kind of a deer in the headlights reaction, like what is there left to eat, right? And so all of a sudden vegetables become our best friend. There are hundreds of different kinds of vegetables readily available to us, but the average person maybe eats 2 or 3 different kinds of vegetables. Eating healthy fats so that we are fueling ourselves on healthy fats as opposed to sugars is the other key. And an appropriate amount of protein, a condensed source of protein, depending on the person's dietary preference, either the very cleanest, most natural, cruelty-free sources of meats or vegan or vegetarian sources of condensed proteins. So,
what are the condensed proteins for vegan and vegetarians?
Pretty much the legume bases. I believe that soy in its fermented states can be healthy to eat. Tempeh and miso. I am of the opinion that tofu and soy milk are not healthy. These are refined processed foods and they have been altered in such a way that can cause inflammation in the body. Not to mention that most soy these days is genetically modified and is grown with a good dousing of Roundup, right? So there's a lot of toxicity, right? Other sources are nuts and seeds, obviously, and then the whole conversation of complementing proteins is important if someone is committed to a vegetarian diet. I think that gardening is the #1 way that someone can lose weight, right? And you know why? It's because losing weight is all about falling in love with vegetables, right? The vegetables at the grocery store have no nutritional density, and therefore they have no flavor. They were picked a month ago before they were ripe, trucked 1,500 miles from some other country, and they have absolutely no flavor. So how is a person going to eat a diet full of vegetables with all that cardboard, right? So getting into gardening as a lifestyle, people will say to me, I don't have time to garden. It's a lifestyle, making that shift, starting to bring that activity in as something fun that you do, either on your own as a meditative, quiet, stress management type of experience, or grab your friends. If you have kids or spouse, bring the whole family into it. Get your next door neighbor, make it a fun activity that you do with your friends and family and neighbors. So why? Why gardening? Because you're going to have better nutrient density in your food, therefore the food is going to be bursting with flavor. Now we're falling in love with vegetables. Now we can stop reaching for the sugary things. Vegetables are in and of themselves detoxifying to the body, so weight loss is about detoxification, right? It's exercise. We're outdoors. All that bending over and squatting and carrying large bags of compost and all of this activity is burning calorie and getting movement back into the body. It's fresh air. We're breathing in pure, clean, fresh air, and this fuels our metabolism, so the base metabolic rate starts to go up, and people just burn more calories when they sleep after your metabolic rate is improved. We're getting sunshine. Now we're making vitamin D. Vitamin D is an important part of a healthy immune system, an important part of weight loss just in terms of the immune response. And it's It's a spiritual practice. It can be, because now we start to get in touch with the earth. We start to get in touch with the cycles of life and death. The miracle of taking a seed that's this dry, little tiny, round object that looks inanimate, put it in the ground, tuck it in, water it, and to see the life come bursting from that seed, it's really quite miraculous, right? And so we nurture that plant all the way through its growth phase, and then flowering and fruiting, and then we harvest that fruit. And then the plant withers and dies, and we go through the whole cycles of life and death, and we're more in touch with ourselves, right? And so we're no longer feeling that lost kind of bewilderment that so many people in our modern society have. This is all contributing to weight loss. This is stress management. Either put an iPod on and have some music going and dance your way through your gardening, or just enjoy the sound of the birds and the crickets when you're out there and really connecting with the earth and nature. Very therapeutic and meditative. So the studies obviously on meditation for stress management and how that's related to weight loss are many, right? So obviously I believe that gardening, and you know, if somebody chooses a vegetarian diet, then it can be gardening, producing fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries. You know, not just a once-a-year garden that you plant and start over the next year, but planting the types of plants that will produce food year after year after year, so that it starts to take less and less time, right? Cultivating a perennial garden in the permaculture sense of it. If somebody wants to include animals, chickens for eggs, or a goat for some dairy, you know, these are fun, wonderful learning adventures, and especially if there's kids involved, it's so great for our kids to see where food actually comes from. So producing our own food at home with our family, friends, and neighbors is pretty much the answer to, you know, pretty much every problem we've got. If I can make a bold statement like that. And not just on our personal level, but on a planetary level as well. How are we going to fight climate change? How are we going to handle the peak oil situation when food becomes more and more expensive? Producing our own food at home addresses the biodiversity, where we start to bring back more varieties of foods. You know, 90% of the types of foods that we had 100 years ago are gone now because of the monocropping of commercial agriculture. So when we're involved in producing our own food, we can bring back variety, and that brings more types of nutrients into our diet. Food sovereignty, that we own our food. It's not owned by a corporation who has a patent on that GMO seed. There's a level of control there that we can step out of when we start producing our own food. We have autonomy, a direct relationship to the earth. We are the only animal on this planet these days that does not know how to source our food directly from the earth. And this has happened just in the last few generations, right? All of our grandparents, great-grandparents, and every generation before them knew how to grow food in the location where they were born. Those traditions and that wisdom was handed down from the parents, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, and it's this living art of how to cultivate food in the location where you live. And so it's not completely lost. It was almost lost, but thank goodness there's a movement now of people wanting to be more involved in producing their own food and medicine. I mean herbal medicine at home, growing the herbs that have the medicinal qualities that we can preserve and fill our medicine cabinet with natural, helpful substances. So this has to happen, and not only does it have to happen, but I believe it's inevitable, right? Food is going to become so expensive that this is really the only viable option of how we're going to be able to feed ourselves in the future. And also the conversation of, you know, the question is asked, how are we going to feed the upcoming 9 billion people on this planet? And there's all these theories about various scientific approaches for how we get more yield out of our commercial agricultural crops. And vegetarian or non-vegetarian, and there's huge debates going on about how we're going to feed the 9 billion people. Well, it seems completely clear to me that we're going to do that by getting back to the way that humans used to feed themselves, which was by producing our own food in our own backyards, regaining that wisdom, joining together with our friends, family, and neighbors to make it an integral part of our lifestyle, where we make it a fun activity, and learning all of the arts, relearning, remembering all of the arts that come along with that. Seed saving, food preservation, how to harvest, how to protect those seeds through the winter, which plants will grow in which climate. All of these are arts that were almost lost, but we're holding on to them and we're bringing them back now. This is the key to autoimmunity. This is the key to weight loss, diabetes, cancer. The purest, most nutrient-dense nutrition available is that which you'll grow in your own backyard.
In this episode, you've learned some amazing practical points and perspectives on weight loss. You've learned that the closer we can get to going back to nature and to a whole food diet, the more easily our bodies will shed the excess weight. We've talked about how there isn't just one ideal diet for everyone, but we have to really learn about how our individual bodies, our genetics, our environment, and other factors contribute to what is ideal for our body. We have to learn that if we do have food allergies or other factors influencing our health, such as mold in our homes, these could be triggering our health problems. We've also learned about addictive foods and how they've been created by a food industry intent on making a profit off of our consumption. Our personal health is not a concern for this industry, as it stands in the way of a larger profit margin. Thus, it is up to each of us to take it into our own hands, to go back to nature and to produce our own food, or go to the organic farmers markets to truly take time to consider what we are putting into our bodies. In the words of Ann Wigmore, the food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. So, give your body the medicine that God has created for it to thrive. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure that you're here. I'm so glad for the truth that we've been able to discover together in God's Word, in what science is now showing, that we can be well, we can have hope, we can have healing, we can restore our bodies to the way God intended. God is on our side, and the truth is in His Word, and we have His power here. God is speaking to you right now. He's giving you hope and inspiration, and the truth that is in His Word that is just an arm's reach away from most of us. It's in our homes. It's almost in every hotel. There's a Bible in there. The Bible is filled with hope and rich promises. These are promises to prosper our health, to take care of us, to protect us, and promises of eternal life. And these are just such amazing gifts. So I just want to thank you so much for being here, and I want to celebrate the truth that we get to celebrate together. During this free screening, we have a special offer of offering the Bible Health Success Protocol to you at a huge saving with a bunch of bonuses. I want to encourage you to take action on that opportunity right now, because what it does is it enables you to have this resource for life. We understand that we have a limited time that we can screen this, and we're so glad that we get this to the world for free, and we're going to continue to do that. When you make the decision to own the resource, you can keep it for life. And by doing that, you're able to use it to help you in a time of need. You're able to help use it to progress in your health and to learn new and exciting things, and watch this at your own leisure, rewatch episodes of modules, read through the transcripts and listen to the MP3s, and enjoy what's in the entire package when you take action today and secure that saving. So check it out by clicking the link below, and by owning this series, you're able to give hope to thousands, if not millions, of other people as we're able to keep going, releasing free content, touching and changing the world. And our mission is to touch, change, and inspire lives. That's why I'm actively involved in a project in Africa, in Kenya particularly, with famine relief. We're saving lives consistently on a day-by-day basis with basic necessities. People are dying for lack of food and dying for lack of opportunity. Supplying these people with seeds and tools and drought-resistant crops that make a huge difference and change around the future of a family. It's an incredible thing. We're supporting these charities, Eyes for India, restoring the eyesight to the blind, and also helping the homeless in this country, in America, with medical supplies that they obviously can't afford, with eyesight, with dental care. These things that make a difference, that leave people either debilitated or in constant pain. So we're making a difference because we believe that that's what God's put on our heart, and we just encourage you to be a part of that and join arms with us to reach the world and be a blessing. And you can do that by owning this series. We will be giving those donations, significant, large donations to each of these charities, and continuing this work. You'll continue to have a resource that you can share with your loved ones, and it will make a tremendous difference in their lives. So if you want to be a part of this mission, if you want to be a part of a movement that is saving lives, then please take action today. Go ahead and click the link below so you can be with us in this journey and support this mission.